Hey gang, we're in Tennessee right now, actually in a town called Erwin, historic Erwin, Tennessee, and I'm standing in front of the old train station, which is a public library now, the Unicoi County Public Library, or called the in memorial of Colonel Tony. But yeah, Erwin, this is, a lot of people come here. It's definitely a tourist destination. Beautiful little town. One of the big things they do every year is they celebrate they have the Apple Festival. It's a big celebration. Vendors come from all over the country. It's a big event here, like I say, a celebration. But in this town, I will tell you one thing that they don't celebrate, and that is a dark memory from 1916. It was a bad day here, and I think they probably don't want to talk about it here. They certainly don't celebrate it. Not really publicized, but that was the day that a 500-pound cow elephant, a female elephant, was viciously, I'm going to say, tortured and murdered, executed in a slow, painful way in front of hundreds and hundreds of gawkers here that just loved watching it. And it's part of it's dark history that wants to be forgotten, but Faces of the Forgotten, we're going to tell the story, and it happened like right here. Train tracks are right here. I want to thank Angie Trevette, who suggested this story, gosh, 2 years ago. I've been meaning to come here, finally made it. So I'm going to give you a warning. It's a horrific story. It's probably one of the worst animal cruelty, torture stories it's right up there. And I'm going to warn you, if you're squeamish about that, don't even watch this. It's a terrible story. So let's take a walk, and let's try to, it'll be in remembrance of this poor elephant, who is a very smart, intelligent creature. They all are. As many animals. She was 30 years old. Her name, Mary. She knew what was going on. It's just horrific. So let's take a walk. I'll tell you this really sad story. Yeah, 1916. The circus would come through town, all these towns along the rail. That was kind of the typical thing. This place was the railroad boomtown of the time. You can still see the big operations that are here. It was the Clinchfield line, and it used to carry coal out of these Tennessee mountains. The Clinchfield and Blue Ridge Pottery were the major employers here in Erwin. This was, right here, the busiest place in town. And you can see these old buildings are still here. This looks like probably the railroad office building, and that's definitely early 20th century architecture. Well, there was a circus that came. There was a man named Charlie Sparks. Charlie was the owner of Sparks' world-famous shows. It was a small-time circus, a traveling circus, and they had some rather unique and interesting animals. He had sea lions that were educated. They had grease-painted and powdered dogs and humans posing like Greek statues. They had the man who walks upon his head, and they had elephants, and that was their biggest promotion. That was kind of their claim to fame. I mean, all of the circuses had elephants, like P.T. Barnum, right? But They claimed to have the biggest elephant, Mary, and she was said to be 3 inches taller than Jumbo, billed as the biggest elephant in the world. Mary was 30 years old, and at that age she was very smart and very talented. She could play 25 tunes on the musical horns without missing a note. She was the pitcher on the circus baseball game routine, and she carried a 400 batting average. But there was a dark side to Mary. Charlie Sparks would say that she was dangerous, and he said that she had killed some men. But hey, she was bringing in the money. She was bringing in the money. She made this circus famous. It was Monday, September 11th, 1916. The Sparks world famous shows was playing in St. Paul, Virginia. It's a tiny mining town in the Clinch River Valley, and there was a drifter named Red Eldridge, young guy, and he was hired on as an elephant handler. He was a hobo, and he came to St. Paul months before in a boxcar. He marched in the circus parade that afternoon, handling and driving Mary as he was walking from behind. And that's what they would do. They'd have a stick and they'd kind of poke them along. Well, quoting from one witness, a 19-year-old W.H. Coleman, after the main show, Red was assigned to Mary to take her to a pond where she could drink and splash with the other elephants. Of course, the witness, W.H. Coleman, did not know that it was Red, but he just saw a young man driving Mary. And he said, quote unquote, there was a big ditch at the time run up through Center Street, and they'd send these boys to ride the elephants. There was, I don't know, 7 or 8 elephants, and they went down to the water to water them. And on the way back, each boy had a little stick, it was like a spear, and it had like a hook on the end of it. And this old big elephant reached over to get her a watermelon rind. It was about half a watermelon somebody had just eaten, and they just laid it down there. And when she did, that boy, and he was talking about Red, gave her a jerk. He pulled her back. Well, when he did that, she just blowed real big. And when she did, she took him right around her waist and then throwed him against the side of a drink stand. And he just knocked the whole side out of it. I guess it killed him. But when he hit the ground, the elephant just walked over and set her foot on his head, and blood and brains and stuff just squirted all over the street. Well, there was a man dead. And Sparks, Charlie Sparks, he was no fool. He probably worried that no town would invite his circus to perform with a mad elephant on the loose. So he quickly moved his circus on down the line to the next town, Erwin, Tennessee. Here we are. But the news had preceded them. Tensions were building. People had followed the train line, and blending in with the Erwin locals here, they all started chanting, "Kill the elephant. Kill the elephant. Let's kill him." The crowd began chanting. Well, Charlie Sparks decided that as valuable as Mary was, she had to go. She had to go. Justice must be served. But the challenge was, how are we going to kill her? How are we going to do this deed? Well, suggestions were coming in. First thought was just use a gun. But they already tried that. Just after Red's death, blacksmith Henry Cox fired his .32-20 5 times at Mary, and it had no effect. Circus manager shouted, "There ain't a gun enough in this country that she could be killed." And someone suggested electrocution. But railroader Mont Lilly stepped forward from the crowd and he said they already tried that back in Kingsport. They put 44,000 volts to her and she just danced a little bit. Well, why don't we try crushing her between two facing engines? Or we could pull her apart. Well, in the end, they decided to hang poor Mary. She would be hanged by the neck from one of those railroad derrick cars the next day. And if you're wondering what those cars are, well, it's a big crane that sits on one of the railroad cars. And it's used for clearing debris off the tracks and other kind of projects. So they went ahead with it. And it was a very sad affair. What happened was they had a show that day. Mary didn't perform. And the crowd was like, "Where's Mary? Where's Mary?" So what did old Sparks say? He got on the microphone or the horn and he said, "Don't be disappointed. We're going to have a real show for you after this. We're going to hang that elephant and you guys can all come to watch. And it won't cost you no tickets needed. You're in." How about that? So they came out here and we're probably standing very close to the spot here. Maybe in the middle, right here. And they brought Mary. And what they did is they chained her. They chained her to the wheels, one of the wheels of that car that was parked here with the crane. One of the witnesses, a woman named Myrtle Taylor, remembered that every child in Erwin was here at the Clinchfield Yards. She said, "And they took the other elephants and Mary down Love Street from the performance to the rail yards, trunk to tail. We kids hung back because we were scared to death, but still we wanted to see it. We wanted to see what it was going to be like." Wade Ambrose, who was 20 at the time Mary was brought out here, recalls that the roustabouts chained Mary's leg to that rail and that wheel and then drove the companions back to the roundhouse. He said they had a time getting the chain around her neck. Then they hooked the boom to the neck chain. When they began to lift Mary, I heard the bones and ligaments crackling in her foot. And they finally figured out that she'd not been released from the rail, so they unhooked her foot. What happened next? Well, they tried to lift her again, but as soon as she left the ground, the neck chain snapped, and poor Mary hit the ground. This poor elephant was confused. She tried to stand up, but she struggled. She couldn't stand because her hip was broken. Now the crowd panicked. Everyone started running for cover. They shouted, "Mary is loose! Mary is loose!" Screaming. Of course, she couldn't move because of her broken hip, but they didn't know that. Wade Ambrose continued. Then one of the roustabouts ran up her back like he was climbing a small hill and attached a heavier chain. And it worked. The crane pulled her up into the air, and shortly after that, Mary finally died. And they left her hanging there for a half hour. They left her there for a half hour. Well, what happened next? Right here, possibly where we're standing, they got a steam shovel and they dug a massive hole. They said it was by the roundhouse or the the turntable where they turn the trains. It's probably right near where we are right now, because this is the area that, it really widens out. So they got this steam shovel and they dug this huge hole. They said the hole was the size of a barn. And then they rolled poor Mary in there, the carcass, the body. And if that wasn't bad enough, just as they were putting dirt on her, some lame brain jumps in there with a saw, and her tusks were already cut off, but there's still some ivory, and he's getting that ivory so he can make dice. Not verified, maybe that's legend, but wouldn't be surprised. So somewhere right here where we are standing, I am going to tell you is most probable that we are standing over the grave of poor Mary. And I don't see, there's no markers. I asked the library, said history, museum, what have you got here? And nobody really knew anything. There's no history museum, maybe 5 miles away. I think there's a heritage center, she said, but there's nothing really. Poor Mary. I'm sure the young woman doesn't even know. I can tell you this though, years ago there was an antique shop here memorializing and capitalizing on Mary's death. The owners of the Hanging Elephant Antique Shop sold t-shirts with Mary's picture. And they also had a huge picture of Mary on the side of their building. But in more recent times, they have got rid of them. They probably came to their senses and ran them out of town. I don't know, but they're not in business anymore. Well, I don't think it's funny. I don't think that it's something you make money off of. I mean, it's horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous history. Gosh, standing here, I'm like, don't you think there should be some memorial or marker where she is? If not having to tell the whole story, she should have a grave marker, right? I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm speechless for once. Rest in peace, Mary, wherever you are. Terrible story. Terrible story.